at the helm of democratizing the manufacturing ecosystem and entrepreneurship in our country. My next guest on Duologues is the CEO of a world's fastest growing manufacturing solutions company from India. Please welcome Mr. Amrit Acharya, CEO and co-founder of Zetwerk, to this episode of Duologues. So Amrit, first of all, let me thank you for hosting me at your beautiful campus here, the Zetwerk campus in Bangalore. It's a pleasure to be here. To begin with, my first question to you is that how did the name Zetwerk, come into your mind?
Yeah. No, when we were starting the company, we knew we were trying to build a manufacturing enterprise. So we were looking for where does manufacturing excellence come from? And if you look at some of the earliest companies in India, like L&T, they're set up by Danish engineers.
Right.
And so we wanted a name which kind of paid homage to that journey of Indian manufacturing, which started. So Zetwerk actually Dutch word.
Yeah.
And it also rhymes with network.
Right.
So it fit our needs beautifully.
Fantastic. So if you look at in my own experience, I started my career into manufacturing and invested about 9 years of my professional career into spaces within manufacturing. The way I look at manufacturing and say, if we look at a longer window, say last 100 years, for many decades, people who could manufacture could actually propose their products to consumers. So fundamentally, the ability to manufacture, and that was the time when mass manufacturing was starting to take shape, say when Ford was telling the world what it takes to assemble goods in abundance. And then came a time when not only you should know what it takes to manufacture, but also manufacture goods of good quality.
Right.
And those were the decades when, say, Japanese started to grow quite rapidly across the world. Then came a time that not only you should know what it takes to manufacture goods with good quality, but also look at the entire value chain, say from conceptualization of products to say after sales service. That is the time we are going through at this point of time. So tell us more about Zetwerk. In this whole supply chain or value chain,
right,
how are you looking at fitting yourselves into, and what is that differentiated value which you are looking at creating?
Right. No, so we work with lots of companies in India and globally. The unifying theme for us is we want to be a highly reliable partner.
Right.
That let's take a consumer brand. They want to launch a new product. That is where their energy should go. Okay. They should figure out the market for that product, what is the best possible product that they can make. And it's not that manufacturing is an afterthought, but manufacturing takes energy away from all the creative pursuits.
Right.
And oftentimes, when you look at smaller companies, the reasons these people started those companies is to build that product in the first place. And manufacturing actually takes up a lot of bandwidth. So what we want to provide is manufacturing as a platform to the world's leading consumer brands, to the world's leading industrial companies, that frees up bandwidth in some way that, look, we are there for you. We will be highly reliable. We will solve your problem statements on cost, quality and time. We will help you bring your products to market faster, better, cheaper. And so that ultimately frees up bandwidth for you and for the economy overall, that more products can be built, more value can be unlocked downstream. And we do it in a way that is positive for both our customers, and we are a marketplace business, and also for our suppliers. So
right.
That's
so I believe that this thought process is fitting in well with the need of the hour, both for the industry and for the country itself.
Right.
Clearly, we need to expand the share of manufacturing into our GDP in the coming decades. And on the other hand, if you look at the headwinds, we have countries which have been manufacturing-led economies for last few decades.
Right.
And there are other countries within Asia which are starting to catch up. Vietnam happens to be one of them.
Right.
And the supply chains and the policies also are such that there are certain FTAs in place, and there can be a lot of disablers of a sort when it comes to products of different weights and proportions.
Yeah.
So how are you wanting to create a very clear focus? What is that strategy which is letting you create a clear focus that these are the products and categories and sectors which are clearly identified for you to be able to drive that kind of value for the ecosystem?
Right. So, us as a business, we are present across multiple sectors. Almost 70-80% of our business is what we classify as industrial products. So, there we serve supply chains like renewables, we serve supply chains like oil and gas, aerospace, automotive, infrastructure. And another 20-30% is consumer products, where we serve retail and brands. And while we have a diversified view of the business, we also have a concentrated view of the business in some senses. So if you look at today, our biggest category is actually renewables. Almost 10-15% of our entire company's revenue comes from that category. It's a great category. Now, if you look at the market over a 10-year time period, it's very hard to predict which year which sector will do well. But it is very easy to predict that over the next 10 years, there will be more renewables than what it is there today.
Absolutely.
And some of that you see visible in today's market, like both India and the US. We serve customers in these markets. If you take solar, they were averaging 10 to 15 gigawatts of solar new capacity addition every year. Now suddenly the push is to double that, to say how do these countries do 20 to 30 gigawatts of solar every year. Now demand can move overnight, but supply can't catch up overnight. To set up a facility to solve for solar, whether it's the modules, things below, takes at least 6 months to 12 months. Right? Similarly, we have a view on electronics. Again, it's a new business for us. We started it 2 years back. Most of the electronics made in India are not made in India. Now, for a large market like India, if you take again a long time horizon, that doesn't make sense. Now, of course, there'll be things around, things like you mentioned, FTA but if you draw a long enough time horizon, somehow they will get solved.
They don't matter.
So our position is A, that industry is growing fast. B, the mix of that industry is growing from import to local. So we are benefiting from two tailwinds, the growth of the industry plus the mix. And hence it is a market that we want to be in. So we look at it from that lens.
If you look at the supply chain, like, on one way, if I have to like summarize the biggest value which you're trying to drive for your customers is something like aggregating manufacturing, and in this whole process, creating scale to drive competitiveness. The economies of scale naturally will deliver a certain cost competitiveness, better quality, and so on and so forth. Then comes a question that in this whole value creation, you are also looking at collaborating with people in the backward integration space. So for commodities and for metals and stuff like that. How is the current view? Like how much of this part of the supply chain is like imported and what proportion would be like locally sourced? And then comes the assembly operations.
I mean, us as a business, 80% of what we do is Indian customers, Indian suppliers. So there, the problem we are solving is a problem of efficiency. It's not that demand and supply didn't exist, but the way they were transacting with each other was not the most efficient transaction. And some of it is due to recent changes in the economy like GST. In a pre-GST world, supply chains were a little bit more local. In a post-GST world, the entire country opened up. So that benefited us in terms of introducing a new class of suppliers to a new class of companies. If you go down to the small manufacturing entrepreneur, and in fact my co-founder's father was one such person, they are, let's take a steel fabrication business, which is basically metal bending. Typically there will be one promoter. The same promoter would be doing sales, would be doing operations, would be doing finding a truck, and often they'll have one or two customers only. And typically these one or two customers would be companies where this person had worked for 10 years and then come out and set up a shop. And when you ask these guys, hey, why haven't you added more customers? And you will get a lot of interesting answers, but the core insight there is a new customer is not opportunity. A new customer is perceived as risk. And what if this customer doesn't pay me? What if this customer doesn't work out? And there is basically a trust deficit in the market, which India is actually not one country. India is 20 countries. Sometimes the answers are as simple as, I'm a supplier in Trichy. I know only how to speak Tamil. I don't know how to communicate with the customer in the northern part of India, And sometimes the answers are better, but you will find a lot of trust deficit in the country. So in our India business, we are primarily solving for that. Of course, we are solving for reliability from our customers' point of view. We are solving for capacity utilization from a supplier's point of view, but
Great
the reason exists, the business exists because of trust
A
deficit.
great point.
Then there are newer things that are happening in the economy. There is China plus one, there is India wanting to localize.
Right.
These are additional tailwinds we have discovered in the last 2 years.
Right.
So I would still put that the core problem statement we are solving, I think we have a long way to go before we fully solve it. We are of course benefiting from starting the business at the time we did start it, and that we couldn't have predicted.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. It's a phenomenal growth which has happened in last 2 to 3 years. But one fantastic point which I believe is that not only you are looking at creating capabilities to help people to manufacture their products, but I believe this will also have another rub-off when you spoke about eliminating the trust deficits and creating those partnerships. I believe you are also in this whole process looking at driving entrepreneurship into smaller towns of the country also, in smaller parts of the country also, both on the supply side and demand side. Right. Is that happening naturally or you're driving it consciously?
No, we do both. Like I would say, after having spent 5 years doing this, there is a lot to be optimistic about in terms of the density of entrepreneurship talent that is there in the country.
Right.
All of the suppliers we work with are entrepreneurs.
Right.
They have at some point quit their jobs and set up a factory, and through that factory they've built a business. There are lots of challenges these guys face.
Right.
And I would say generally an underserved community in terms of access to credit, in terms of just various formal solutions that large companies enjoy.
Right.
Small companies don't enjoy that.
Fantastic.
They'll all be operating at 40-50% kind of utilization levels. But again, there you will find two types of entrepreneurs. There is a set of entrepreneurs who are kind of content. They are running it as a way of earning income. Then there is a set of entrepreneurs who actually are more ambitious.
Right.
And they want to reinvest the money they make back into the business. So we have partnered with a lot of those folks where we have said, look, we have a lot of demand. The problem with starting a manufacturing business is, can this factory produce the right quality of product, and can I find customers? We have eliminated 50% of the risk because we have almost guaranteed demand in some way if the supply is good enough, and hence we actually free up bandwidth for the entrepreneur to focus on the product.
Absolutely.
So it's a great win-win situation.
Yeah.
And I feel our approach is that, there is a version of the company where we can do everything ourselves.
Right.
But we don't believe in that. We want, if something already exists, but it is not polished, our job is to polish it.
Right.
In rare occasions, we may want to do it ourselves.
How do you reach out to people? This might have two perspectives. One is the formalized aspect of it, where people are looking out for people who can let aggregate the manufacturing and assembly operations happen, who already are part of the large ecosystem. The other perspective which is evolving out of our conversation is that people who are small entrepreneurs spread across the country, operations like sheet metal, foundries, those kind of small family-led businesses. So how do they reach out to you, or vice versa also? How are you reaching out to them?
No, it's tough only. When we reach, so the good thing about that part of the economy is they are all in tier 2, tier 3 towns, but they're all in clusters. So let's say, go to Bangalore, there's a cluster called Pinya, which is a large machining hub. In a 10-kilometer radius, you will find hundreds of machine shops.
Faridabad would be another one.
There. Then you have Pune also. Then you have in Trichy, which is one of our belts we operate. It's a strong fabrication belt.
Right.
And the reason again is very interesting because they've all been developed by one anchor customer in those markets, right? In Bangalore, it's HAL who set up that infrastructure. So, but today, what those guys don't realize is the same capabilities they have. While yes, they started out in, let's say, aerospace, but their machines can also serve automotive. A steel fabricator for thermal power energy can also do renewables.
True.
But they have not experienced the world horizontally. They have experienced the world in silos. So one is we go to these clusters. We initially have to do a lot of legwork ourselves. For us also, we need a lot of information, starting with what machines they have, what products have they made before. So we do it the hard way only. We profile them, we convince them to work with us. But what we see is once we reach a certain market share in that micro geography, let's say 10%, we get a lot of pull from the market because suddenly what will happen is factory was running at 40%, now it's running at 70%. Made some extra money, bought a new car.
Right.
And then they're all social underwriting, right? Like their friends asked them, hey, how do you do this?
The word spreads.
And they said, I worked with this company called Zetwerk.
Right.
And then they come and seek us out. So, I think in some ways we feel that what we're doing is extremely early, that there are probably more people who should be doing what we do. And the good thing about India is a large market.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of people you can partner with. And in some ways, our process today is we are trying to discover the best suppliers in the country and become their best friend, their best business partner of choice. And we grow with them.
Amrit, while you already mentioned that it is difficult to imagine what happens after 10 years, how the sectors will continue to evolve, the dynamics of the entire ecosystem. So where do you look yourselves being in next, say, 3 years' time? Which would be the sectors where majority of your time, effort and resources will go into? Which are those sectors like?
We are looking at electronics in a big way. We are looking at renewable energy in a big way. And we're looking at the US market in a big way. I think these are our top 3 areas of focus. Of course, we continue to do many other things. The reasons we are again focusing on these 3 things is there is some non-linearity in the market today. Like the whole US business is basically China +1.
Right.
Electronics business is make in India. Renewables is just a shift that is happening globally, and India and US are actually leading the way. So a little bit of non-linearity helps because a tough part about a business is getting to work with a customer the first time. Large companies have a lot of process. But once we enter a customer supply chain, often we grow a lot within that customer. And our constraint becomes quickly supply side, do we have the capabilities, etc. Right? Hence, we tend to kind of little bit incrementally prioritize areas where there is some tailwind over and above the core capabilities of the business. It helps us attract customers faster. Like our US business, I'll give an example. It's 15% of our revenue. But till 6 months back, we had 5 people in the US. We had built that business entirely from India. And all of it happened during not met a single one of our customers. We had done all those things over Zoom. When I started the business, we couldn't have imagined, we had aspirations to enter the US, but we didn't think it would be, it would happen at such a quick time and with the minimal effort that we put in. It was all pull from the market. We like those sectors.
So Amrit, what I believe is that sometimes supply chains can be complex. And having this conversation, I realized that you're trying to solve a complex problem in a very simple manner. And the narration is also such, it can be really complex. I myself, being part of this industry, understand that it's not easy to put these pieces together, but a fantastic effort. And when I look at the growth and the impact which you are already starting to create only in last 4 to 5 years is phenomenal. So more power to you and the team. Moving on to the next part of our conversation, tell us, how did you guys come together? All the co-founders, how did this idea come in your mind? I would also like to move on to the conversation to understand you more. You studied from IIT Madras, so what was the culture over there like and your own career? But before we get into that, how did you guys come together? What was that one idea cutting across everyone?
Actually, the two are intertwined. So I grew up in Bhubaneswar, and I was there till my undergrad, which I did in Chennai, IIT Madras. That's where I met one of my co-founders, Srinath. We went to college together. We kind of grew up together. Then when we graduated, both of us joined ITC. That's where I met a couple of my other co-founders. So, personal life, professional lives have intertwined. I think that'll be the case in a lot of founding journeys. My first job at ITC was to build a new factory. I had just joined, I was 21, 22 years old. And I was put in charge, I was part of a small team which basically built a new factory in Mysore for export requirements. And when I joined, we had land, and over the next 2 years, we converted land into a factory. But I was working 24 hours, 7 days a week. I was doing procurement, I was doing hiring, I was building a lot of software for the factory. And I really enjoyed it because at the end of 2 years, you had something very tangible to show for your effort.
Absolutely.
You converted land into a humming factory.
Right.
And that was the beginning of my love affair with manufacturing. I took a small detour after that. I spent 2 more years at ITC, and then I spent a few years in the US. But when I came back, and I was at McKinsey for a bit, but very quickly I realized I want to come back to India. I actually left to the US in 2014. That's when the new Prime Minister Modi just had got elected. There was a lot of activity in India, in the startup world also, and in some ways I felt that, I've left India at the wrong time. And I could see a lot of my friends.
That is the place where the action is.
Yeah. And hence I was just itching that, I don't want to regret this, that I actually left at the wrong time. So I was just looking to what is the best possible opportunity to come back. And I came back pretty quickly. In 2018, January, I came back. And when I came back, I just started talking to friends I knew, and Srinath and Vishal and a few others. We kind of came together very quickly. I had given myself a year, and luckily it all worked out in a couple of months only. So we all decided that we want to work together. We of course knew each other for a long time, and then we just looked back at what we had done before. In my case, I had built a factory. In Srinath's case, his family business was into manufacturing. So I understood demand, he understood supply. It kind of came together a little bit organically.
In my own experience, there are sort of 3 C's. It can be like cliched, but 3 C's which I have understood play a significant role. First is capability, second is character, and third is consistency.
Right.
When it comes to building capabilities or your individual capabilities, it's a no-brainer that you had a very clear understanding of what you are wanting to do. Right. And I'm sure this will grow with time. Right. Second is characters. How do you look at complementing with each other? Because, few people coming together to build a capability definitely is an opportunity. Then for you to be able to create consistent synergies, to consistently drive, because you need to take rapid decisions, fast decisions, to be able to continue to have this kind of exponential impact and growth. So give us a sense of what is that 1 or 2 characteristics which kind of bind all of you together.
Yeah. No, I think it starts with we all love what we do. Like it starts, and it's somewhat basic to say it out loud, but like what we do, we've heard a lot of versions of it. People say, it's so unsexy, it is so behind the scenes. In fact, when we were raising money initially to fund the business, people were very surprised by how did we pick this category. It's just so behind the scenes. But it very much aligns with our personalities, right? Like, some people may find manufacturing unsexy, but we find it very interesting. And for me, it gives a lot of kick that we made this product happen. Like today, when we work with a lot of consumer brands, the good thing about consumer is in the packaging it says manufactured by so and so, and you see our name there. You see our name on Amazon website, you see Flipkart. So it gives us energy and gives us excitement. So it starts with loving what we do. And second thing is a shared set of common values, and we have a bunch of them. But one of the core ones that stands out for us is we genuinely believe done is better than perfect. That was a very early value. It really propelled the business. And it was interesting because we were trying to do it in an industry which actually values perfection. Manufacturing is, quality has to be 99.99%. It can't be 99.98%. But within that, we still found enough opportunities where the core problem statement, the core problems that customers were facing us, they were not getting their product on time. And that required a little bit of mindset shift that, yes, we may not get it to 100%, but even if we get it to 90%, you can still exponentially change the time at which a product can be made. You can shrink the timelines a lot. So that became a core value for us. Like, how do we do things faster? And that is ingrained into the company. Like, it is sometimes, we'll give a very simple example of this. Sometimes we are working with, let's say, a large refinery in oil and gas. Some certificate is required to progress to next step. A traditional company will say, I will just wait for it to happen.
True.
It is not part of my scope. But in our case, we'll go that extra mile and solve it for our customer. Like, how do we because it shrinks the timeline for the entire supply chain.
Absolutely.
So we have that attitude that our scope is not our company, our scope is the industry. So speed is important, transparency is important. We are building a company, and a company is, you will know this, nothing but a collection of people.
Absolutely.
Who come together.
So in my case, I quite often distort the average age of my organization, and being into your office, I could feel a sense of energy, vibrancy. A lot of people here, or most of people here, are very young,
Right.
and you spoke about the fact, and this I would also say quite often in my town halls also, that the very fact that it is called a company is company of people coming together. So, you spoke about some shared values, the very purpose which brought all of you together, and now with the kind of exponential growth which is happening, the impact which you're creating over last 3 to 4 or 5 years, the team size has started to expand, and
Right.
so is the case which I can see in this office also. So how are you now creating a strong foundation of the culture which brings people together and brings the best out of them?
Yeah. I think again it starts with intent. Like when we were starting out, like a lot of advice we got from more experienced people, more experienced founders, is that focus on the culture of the business.
Right.
And in the earliest stages, I didn't really fully appreciate it,
Yeah.
if I'm being candid.
Yeah.
Like it sounded like very cliched advice.
Absolutely.
But today, I would say a lot of our whatever we have achieved is because of the culture of the business. And it also holds prospectively that if we want to achieve whatever we want to achieve, it cannot happen without a strong cultural backbone. And cultural backbone is, one is, what are these values you appreciate and how clearly are they communicated to the company. But second is, how do you measure that and how do you incentivize when good culture is rewarded and vice versa, when bad culture is not. And the short answer is it requires intent and effort. You can't outsource it to, let's say even within the company, you can't outsource it to HR. It has to be very deliberate. It has to start with the founders. What values do you demonstrate? What values do you appreciate? What values do you recognize? And then over a period of time, you institutionalize some of it. Like one of my favorite quotes actually is from Jeff Bezos, who had come down to India, and somebody asked him, how do you spend your time today? And he said, I spend my time managing culture. According to him, the culture is still intact. Then Amazon as a business will kind of take care of itself. So, I feel somewhat similar, that you can't take it for granted.
Yeah, that is true. And suppose if I take you back in time, and when you yourselves, like a lot of people who are young, have joined this organization, you would have certain amount of aspirations. And if we further go back in time when you were like in school and subsequently in college, what is that which you were wanting to like become? Quite often in my years, there used to be only a couple of choices. We used to say either we want to become a doctor or an engineer, but there are so many multiple choices, which people want to pursue today. What is that which you were wanting to look at?
So I also come from that generation where mostly it was doctors or engineers. That is the choices my parents gave me. And I was clear I don't want to be a doctor. I think the good thing about that is if you're self-aware as an individual, you can really narrow it down quickly.
Okay.
Like in my case, I have a good example. My father, he was in insurance, and at age 40, he changed his career and became a professor. That was not an easy transition at all, and it required a lot of sacrifice from the family. It required a lot of courage. And I had two takeaways from that. One takeaway was amazing that he did that. He didn't retire with regret. But at the same time, is there a version where instead of age 40, could you have done it at age 30 or could you have done it at age 20? I feel today you can do it at age 20 or 30. You can really discover your purpose, and you can discover it as early as possible. But it requires a little bit of investment from your side. There is, so my advice on that is, it is very easy to go with the flow, and going with the flow is going to a good college, getting the best job, progressing in your career. They're all great choices. But at some point, you need to step back and ask, is this the right choice for me? In my case, I felt that the US was not the right choice for me, and I did want to come back. There is a version of myself who could have stayed in the US and done well. So I think just pausing and asking yourself those hard questions, because your truth only you will know.
Yeah.
It is uncomfortable, but I think if you're able to do that, then I think you can discover your purpose earlier. Because today we are running a business, we're of course having a lot of financial performance as a business, but that's not the only thing we're doing. We are actually, when we work with our supply partners, they are scaling, they are building larger businesses,
Right.
and we are growing with them. We are helping a lot of customers unlock a lot of bandwidth. We are directly, indirectly creating a lot of jobs in the economy.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's how these things happen. That your exposure as an individual, as an org, increases, and you hear a lot of stories and anecdotes which are not necessarily mathematical numbers.
Yeah.
You hear one of our suppliers say, "Hey, I bought a new house."
Life changing, yeah.
We heard a lot of our customers say, "Look, I was able to bring a lot of new products into the market because of the help that you guys did." And when you aggregate that, on a per transaction basis, it looks anecdotal, but when you aggregate that and you see a pattern on what you're trying to solve for, there is a lot of purpose in that.
Yeah, the impact, eventually accumulated impact, far exceeds the business delivery.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's why you're doing what you're doing, right? Like I feel like when you can combine the two things, there's an outcome possible which is not just good but great.
Right.
And I feel our country deserves great.
Yeah.
So we want to build something that hopefully outlives us as a generational company, and is known for solving some of the toughest problems in the industry that we have been present. So that's a long journey ahead. So
in my limited capacity, with whatever tiny understanding I have of this space, I can very confidently say that you are on the way to do that, and there is a long way to go, surely.
Right.
But the direction and the speed and the intent is right, actually. So more power to you. Amrit, this brings me to the last part of our conversation. You spoke about self-awareness, you spoke about consistently trying to understand the very purpose which lets you do what you do. This potentially is my last question to you, that what is that higher purpose? You spoke about creating a bigger impact in the time to come, but what is that single higher purpose which sort of wakes you up every morning to do what you want to do?
Yeah. No, we want to build a generational company. Like, we want to solve the toughest problems that manufacturing has to offer. And what that means is, it is again changing over time. Like, initially we were content with being the fastest to bring products to market.
Right.
And we realized that there is a lot of inefficiency that is there in this chain, and over a period of time it contributes to national wastage.
Absolutely.
Like, when you talk about infrastructure as an industry, we hear that everything gets delayed. And in some ways we have just normalized it. Our customers have also normalized it. So when they give us an order saying, I want delivery in 30 days,
Right.
mentally they're okay with 60 days.
Yeah.
They say that, I'll just put 30 days on the contract, but it'll be great if I get it in 60 days. And the reality is, the range is anywhere between 60 to 200. We have just normalized inefficiency in our country. We prioritize money over time. We don't place a value on time. I think that has to change. Solve it at a transaction level, it doesn't matter, but when you aggregate that over a long period of time, over a large scale, you make a dent in the journey of the country, right? So we want to solve for efficiency at a country level. We want to solve for better quality of products that our customers want to bring to market. And we want to do it for as many categories as we can.
Wonderful.
Over a period of time, what that happens is, when you build the base infrastructure well, you can service not only your domestic market, you can serve international markets, which is what we are going through right now, where 15-20% of our revenue comes from outside India. And then that has a cycle of its own, because your international customer, their expectations of time quality sometimes are higher than the expectations in India. but the infrastructure you serve is common for both. And as a result, the overall quality table increases.
Yeah.
So, an anecdote for this is, like, again, just when we were starting the business, we heard all these amazing stories that when the Indian government sometimes has a very tough problem, they will go to, let's say, a Tata, they'll go to an L&T, they'll go to a select group of
Large
companies.
business houses.
I think the country needs more such companies. And we want to be one of those companies.
Fantastic.
Over a period of time.
Fantastic. Sincerely appreciate that, and I can't agree more on that. One great point which you made is that we have to have a paradigm shift in the way we look at transactions to happen. And traditionally we've been looking at the initial cost of ownership, but I think we have to start to look at total cost of ownership. So build things which last longer, which deliver much more than what they do today, eliminate wastages in this whole process, improve the efficiencies and hence productivity. And I believe then the initial cost of ownership also will be much more lower. So this is the journey which I think the country has to
I'll add
take.
one more thing to that. It again has a cultural shift.
Yeah.
That suddenly as a culture, we are not okay with wastage.
Yeah.
And I think that is the biggest shift that we can drive, because for the analogy is for the generation growing up, they have grown up with the internet.
Yeah.
So they don't know a world that existed, even for us, where communication was not as seamless as today. And again, if you can change that culture of, let's say, manufacturing, the next generation, that becomes their baseline, and then you build on top of that.
So Amrit, I'm sort of intrigued to ask one more thing. So, when I look at the society, fundamentally the society is such that we fundamentally don't believe in wastages. On the other hand, my own experience of managing operations, looking at supply chains, I believe that those are the hidden losses which we normally are not able to see. And those are the wastage which needs complete elimination. Are you also talking about those?
Yeah, exactly. Like the example I used was...
Like better inventory controls, better supply chain management.
Yeah, it is...
productivity consistency.
All of those things put together. Why should a customer say that I want product in 30 days, but mentally they have budgeted 30 more days? That means that in their...
That's a mindset. That's a habit which has happened over a period of time.
That has happened because of a decade of inefficiency. Right? And so there is a informal status quo in the economy, which is needs to be improved. So I think that's the short of it.
Fantastic conversation, Amrit. I wish you all the best to everyone here at Zetwerk. It's a great journey you have embarked onto. I wish you all the best. Thank you for this conversation. It was insightful and inspiring. I'm sure it is going to be inspiring to a lot of people also. Sincerely appreciate your time today.
Thanks a lot for spending time with us.
Thank you, Amrit.